Right, I'd like to welcome everyone, Amelia, and everyone who's watching to another episode of the Psychology, Mental Health, and Coaching podcast. And today I have my very special guest, Amelia Lyons, here with me. And we thought we'd like to have a conversation about aging, maturing, getting older. And I think that's really important because as I was actually preparing our conversation, Amelia, last night, I found myself feeling a bit anxious, and I was introspective and was wondering, what is this about? And I thought, actually, aging, as we are all aging, and we are on a different, sort of part of the spectrum in a way, is there are a lot of shame and fear-based beliefs and feelings around that which are often not spoken about. So I feel kind of privileged in some ways that we have this conversation and that you actually inspired us to have the conversation. In your mind, you kind of associated aging with getting smaller. And I'm going to ask you a few questions about that in a minute. I just wanted to say that you and I met in a really interesting place maybe 10, 15 years ago when we both did our group psychotherapy training, which happened in a beautiful monastery in Bedfordshire, where our training institute was based. And whilst we were studying group therapy and conducting groups in the NHS and other places, we also were patients in a group. And you and I spent some good years in a group of that sort, in a group analytic therapy group. So I feel very happy that we managed to maintain our connection and do some creative work like this together now. Yes.
Yeah, me too, Kirsten. Yes, no, I remember you that too at that time. And as I know, we said in another video, I think the very first time I met you, you were actually pregnant with your daughter, who is now 13. And so that sort of dates us a bit.
Yes.
And you were in that transition, the maternity sort of transition, really. And yeah, it's just amazing how quickly time flies, doesn't it?
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
And it's interesting, pregnancy is about getting bigger in some ways, in many ways, but now we want to talk about getting smaller. And I was curious,
nice.
Emilio, yes,
Nice.
what does getting smaller mean for you in the context of age?
Yeah, well, that was my name for it, I think, is I first sort of kind of came up with the just, I'm sure other people have come up with this notion before, but the notion of getting smaller. And I would talk about it in my AA group, actually, where, we sort of often have an exchange to sort of sort out our perspective on life, really. And at the time that I started to talk about getting smaller, I had been made redundant from quite a successful job in a university that was merging with another university, and really there was no room for me in that management tier. And I began to think about that idea of getting smaller, as I was getting older, and also the sort of the advantages of getting smaller. Now, at that stage, I never thought of it actually in a weight context, although I was 17 stone at that point in time. And it was only later when I started to talk with a friend about my weight and the shame of being overweight. And I kind of forced myself to talk about my shame in that context to people who I trusted. And just sort of made it for all those years, up until post 50, really, I hadn't talked about it, and it had been a bit of an elephant in the room. But I began anyway to somehow I felt ready. My mother died. That may have been a contributing factor. And and I began to talk about it with friends. And as I did that, then I began to lose weight.
How interesting, that connection between kind of coming out, sharing some of your worries, shame about being overweight, and at that point you're beginning to become smaller. Right?
Yes, and I hadn't made the connection between the two, because at that stage I was talking about getting smaller as, yes, on the one hand, as a woman, you become more invisible. It's
Right.
pretty
Yes.
scary. Your skin
Yes.
starts to sag, you lose your looks. How much shall I spend on plastic surgery? But the idea also, I was thinking in terms of getting smaller, was sort of kind of like downsizing myself in terms of self-importance, in terms of not sort of, there might be the idea of, well, do I sit in an armchair and just allow myself to shrink? And I don't mean that, but I mean sort of not necessarily having to prove myself anymore, having a
Right.
smaller job,
Mm.
and I do have a smaller job now. I work 3 days a week, and that's
Mm.
good for me.
Mm.
That's good for me. And
Yes.
because I'm older, I can manage my money on that. And I'm already
Mm.
drawing a pension. So,
Mm.
so I've got that and my job. And so actually I'm comfortable financially, for example. So, I don't need to be the CEO or some highfalutin
Yes.
success
So it's
any.
yes. Yes. So before you had a high-powered management job at a university, and as you were made redundant and began to think
Mm,
about life,
mm.
you maybe there is a
Right.
certain freedom, or maybe
Yeah.
a less need for external validation in that sense. Maybe less need for
Yeah,
that.
I mean,
Maybe.
again, that felt sort of shameful. If we kind of think about that topic of shame, it felt shameful to be made redundant. My first thought was, what will other people think of me?
Mm,
And
mm, mm.
and then my second thought was, well, your friends will love you anyway. They'll want to be there for you. And I
Yeah,
immediately
yeah,
knew that was right.
yes,
At the
yes,
same
yes.
time, my first thought was, well, how does this look from the outside? It looks like I'm a failure,
Mm,
and so
mm,
on. And
mm,
and yeah, to an extent, I had run my course in that job, and it was time for me to move on. And the organization gave me a gentle nudge, and I took the hint.
mm,
So, but yeah, it was something about, okay, so in one sense, there's something as you get older too. I remember getting to 50, and it was 49 when I was made redundant. Um, Accepting that this is my life. It's kind of like, oh shit, this is my life.
mm, mm.
Bloody hell,
Yes,
this is my life.
yes,
Uh,
yes.
and then opening up to receiving my life.
Mm-hmm.
So it's that old adage, isn't it, of, accepting where you are. The only way that you can move forward. So by getting smaller, I don't mean not growing.
That's
You know,
important, isn't it? Because
yeah.
yes, that would be a misunderstanding.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, but I can see how that could be, that could be an
Mm,
interpretation. But I mean that, so there's something about acceptance of becoming a bit less important in society. I am no longer able to reproduce. I'm not going to bear children for society. I'm now
mm,
drawing a pension, so I'm a bit of a strain on society in that sense. But at the same time, it's kind of something about accepting where I am, and that's a kind of relief. And it's only when you accept where you are, of course, that you can do something about it. That if there's a problem,
mm, mm.
um, like yesterday, I was talking to a close friend and realized that, well, I sought her advice actually, of I need to do 6 therapy sessions on an area of myself where I still am battling with the dreaded shame of the moment. Um,
Right.
and so I talked to her about attachment based EMDR, something like that,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
called. And that sounds like about right. So although, and I thought, on the one hand, I was a bit reluctant, like, oh God, I've had loads of therapy in my life. Do I really need any more? You know.
Mm,
But on the other hand, I could see that there was something that I'd uncovered, a kind of very disproportionate reaction to something that had happened to me at
mm,
work. And I thought, actually, I need to look at this. And I talked it through
mm.
with my colleague, and we were, so that's what growing, isn't it? That's
When we experience shame, there's always judgment involved, and that could be our own judgment of our own
yeah,
aging process,
yeah.
but also societal judgment and ideas and beliefs that we are constantly bombarded with as well. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it doesn't only come from the outside, but also from the inside. And it's the work is maybe to liberate or to become aware of these judgments and trying to let them go. And that's the journey of acceptance in a way that you're talking about. Yes,
Yeah,
and
and that when we get
acceptance.
to accepting, at some point, like I might think, well, look, I'm 61. Do I really want another load of therapy sessions?
Mm,
Um, and it's kind of like, haven't I done all that? So there's a bit of been there, done that,
yes.
on the one hand, battling with, but
Mm,
really you've got to look at this,
mm,
so that
mm,
kind of that tension there, the getting smaller, there is something for me about occupying a smaller space, something about, as I'm less weighty, as it
mm,
were, you're sort of more agile, you can fit into the seat on the plane.
mm,
There's a lightness about being less weighty as well, which could be
mm,
humorous, which could be funny,
mm, mm,
so
mm,
there's a sort of there's less visibility about getting smaller. I agree, and women becoming, so how do we sort of embrace something about perhaps not being so noticeable anymore?
mm.
And to me, that's quite a relief. So
Yes, yes.
I can move a bit more subtly without maybe being noticed so
That's
much,
interesting.
and
Yeah.
that kind of thing.
So you're saying noticeable in terms of having a big job and lots of interactions with people and being responsible on the one hand. But I think as
Yeah.
women, but I think men also have similar feelings. Actually, I spoke to a friend the other day whose 60th birthday it was, and he said, I actually would rather hide because 60 is a funny age. So also not so noticeable if we are heterosexual, maybe by the other gender. So is that what you mean? Noticeable in big jobs, on responsible roles, but also noticeable in terms of the way we
Yeah.
look, or that we might not draw the attention.
All of that, all of that.
Yes,
Because I
yes,
think when you're
yes.
in a big job, it's almost like having your head sticking up from a crowd. That was often my
Mm,
image, when people could see you more than you could see them, and they'd
mm,
see you and they'd notice you, and and would be quite critical. If you
mm,
take the extreme example of a celebrity, who's sort of head, sort of like on Nelson's column, sort of above the crowd, they're seen, they're criticized, and if we take that right down to a sort of smaller stage, then it's something about, yeah, you're seen more when you're, and you're subject to quite a lot of feedback, wanted and unwanted. It's quite, obviously it depends what sort of a job it is, but yeah, so the being less noticed is a relief to me. And also as a woman, yes, you're very much not really seen as a sex object these days, anything like that, although I had used my weight to protect me from that anyway, so in a sense
that's
that
interesting. Yes,
wasn't that wasn't such a transition really.
yes, yes.
But yeah, the not being so noticed, you can just move better and move more. I think it's
That's an
just allow.
interesting thinking process, actually, because I was thinking when we are more visible, we are also more object to denigration or idealization, in a way. People
Yes,
think, wow, she's an amazing boss, or an amazing psychologist, or an amazing group therapist, or more it's acceptable to denigration and idealization. And it's sometimes very hard then to find our inner balance.
yes,
Yes.
I think that's the image that I often have of that period actually is I went from having my arse licked, as it were, from being in a dean of social studies kind of job to wiping arse. So 6 months later, I was working on an old people, a dementia ward, literally,
Oh my goodness. Gosh, right.
literally,
Right. Having your
toileting
ass licked
people,
to wiping other
yeah,
people's
to
asses.
wiping arse,
Right.
to toileting people, to doing all sorts of sort of nursing activities with bodily juices of all kinds and functions and so on. And but you know what? I really enjoyed that job.
Right.
And they were so lovely, the old people. I
You
just
you said you enjoyed it. What
yeah,
did you enjoy about it? Yes.
yeah. just kind of being there for them, listening to them, looking after them, giving them TLC and helping them, and some of them were more aware than others and would be extremely grateful. Others were less aware and wouldn't be, but that was all part of it, and I did think, it was one extreme to another, but that was really good for me, and I just didn't know at all how that would it'd be such a pleasure to do that job. And at the same time, when I was made redundant as well, I also was able to spend more time nursing my mother to her death, and that was a real pleasure as well. So I wouldn't have had that opportunity if I'd have still been in, or even been promoted, which probably I should rightly have been promoted in lots of ways. But I'd never have been able to have been available for my mother if that had happened. So it really does put things in proportion.
Yes, I just wanted to say something to you, Amelia, because we were in a therapy group together as we were going through some of these changes, and I've always admired your resilience and adaptability, because you're coming from a big university job, such as was it a dean of a department, or of a school, dean of a school. You then, yes, rewired. You're almost saying rewiring instead of retiring. You totally immersed yourself in new experiences, such as nursing, such as group psychotherapy, and adapted and changed and took new opportunities and received life, with its losses, but also its richness. And I find that very impressive and inspiring.
But no, I thought I don't know, there was this little sort of voice inside of me. I'd quite like to work in the NHS, I'd quite like to be a nurse. And so I followed that voice, that small voice. Actually, it was a very small voice. But I heard it. Luckily, I heard it. Because sometimes you don't hear that when you're very.
So you had the perception. Yeah, you received your sort of inner guidance in a way through your inner compass, which is brilliant. Yes.
Yeah,
which is maybe.
Often not heard that voice. There are many times. The bigger the job, the less I'm likely to hear that voice.
Right.
Because I'm busy. And when I'm busy, I ain't gonna hear that inner voice.
What do you make of the saying, Amelia, as we sort of talk about aging? Aging is like a wine. We get more mature and better and tastier with age. What do you make of that? I think there is some real wisdom in that, actually, as well.
Yeah. I think of you like that. That the way your practice has developed, and how you've forged forward, and you took an even braver decision than me, because I was being made redundant. You are actually in a high flying job, and decided consciously to change that and move forward, and slightly sort of change the direction of your work, deepening it and expanding it at the same time. So I think you have matured and developed beautifully in that respect. For me, I think aging is something about getting smaller, a bit less self-important, but also trying to continue to be open to receiving my life. So it's not about not growing, it's continuing to grow, but it's something about it's slow grow. It's slow. And it's enjoying being in the slow lane as well, as much as possible, enjoying being in the slow lane.
Yes, I think that's a real skill or capacity to unfold. That is right. I think that's a challenge as well as an enormous opportunity. And I know you've done some mindfulness training as well, which is really helping to live mindfully, in a way, the moment, not so much racing for the next big thing, but to be here, here as we are here with each other.
Yeah,
Yes.
I think there is a bit of a tension, between okay, getting smaller. Does that mean I lose all ambition? Does that mean I give up my dreams? Blah 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 blah. Versus accepting my life and receiving it and continuing to sort of develop. Keep pushing out. I always think of life as you've got to keep pushing out. But there is that sort of fine balance, isn't there, between sort of accepting one's limitations and still exploring, accepting the fact that some dreams are now definitely not going to come true, just due to the fact, for example, I'll never have children, I mean, I'm okay with that as it happens. But, there are certain sort of factual things that are just not going to.
Yes, no, I can resonate with that, Amelia. I can, when I was preparing sort of our conversation today, I was feeling my way into the conversation in some ways. And I also noticed last night that I've been feeling a bit sad and and I was thinking, aging also is accepting, it's a bit like an ongoing grieving process, as well as a celebration. There's almost a tension again, celebrating what we have been able to live and who we've been able to become, in a way, as well as grieving what hasn't been, in a way. And for me, for example, I've always had this wish that I would be a mother with the man that I'm with, which is not ever going to happen again because I've got a daughter, but I'm not with her father, in a romantic couple, even though we have developed a very good co-parenting relationship. But I've always wanted or had this fantasy that I would be with the man, who's the father of my child or children. And it's kind of coming to terms with that, which is a kind of I think it is a grieving process. Natural. Grieving is such a natural part also of keeping alive. I think I must say, I don't know about you, why I feel so alive now most of the time. It's because I've grieved a lot in my life, about the losses I've had to endure, unwanted losses, in a way. Some are wanted, some are unwanted. Like leaving my NHS job was wanted, but losing other things, other people. So it's the grieving process is kind of in the background of aging as well. I mean, I feel we need to be alive to that and honest and true to it as well. I don't know what you think, Amelia.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good way of seeing it. Actually, you have to get better at dealing with loss as you go on, because you're going to get more of it. There's no escaping that. I mean, I've lost friends of my own generation. That's unusual at the moment. It'll become less unusual. And I just didn't know how much that would really, really feel for me. That was just huge. I mean, losing my parents, I expected to lose them and I loved them, but that was okay. Your parents are supposed to die. And you don't want them to die in pain and blah, 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 blah. But when you lose friends, particularly good friends, that's like losing a piece of you that you are never going to get back.
Yes. So did you, how was that for you? Did you lose them to illness or?
Cancer sort of thing,
Right.
not any traumatic sort of accident or anything. But cancer has been what's done it for three of my friends, one of whom was very, very close. I think living with loss is something that becomes more of a feature. And
as we age.
Again, it's something about accepting it, isn't it? And really valuing the mindful thing that you talked about, really valuing, therefore, what you've got.
What we still have.
Yes. Yeah, and like you were saying, the here and now between us, right now.
Yes, 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 yes. That's right. That is right. Is there anything else, Amelia, that you would like to share about aging, themes around aging, losses? We've touched on shame, fear, loss. Yeah, I think grief, which are all natural. I mean, grief and loss are natural, but fear and shame and judgment is not natural in a way. I think we want to kind of liberate ourselves as much as possible from these limiting
Mm.
ideas and painful ideas, yeah, in a way. But yes, is there anything else in your mind about the experience of getting smaller, of aging, of being open to life, letting things go, but also receiving
Yeah,
the
yeah.
loss?
No, I think we've sort of got it really. There's I guess it's an ongoing process.
Yes,
Um,
yes, yes.
that you can be proactive. I've been proactive about my health in certain ways. I've made sure I've
Mm-hmm,
got HRT. I've
mm-hmm.
pursued that till, for to the nth degree to make sure that I've got exactly the right. So done my best for my health in the best ways that I can. So I think there's something about being as proactive as possible to enjoy
Mm-hmm.
the
Yes,
rest of my life, um,
yes,
and
yes,
to receive it, and just to
yes.
in the slow lane with the mindfulness, is to sort of get more and more into the present. And I do notice with older people too, is they are very in, a lot of them are very in the present. And in my mother's, when I was nursing her, we were in the present together a great deal, and that was wonderful, and I think,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, there's something about gratitudes there. So when you think about, when I sometimes ask people I give them a gratitude exercise, and I say, what's the smallest thing that you feel grateful for today?
Mm-hmm.
Right. So I might say, the taste of mushrooms in my mouth. I had some garlic
Mm-hmm.
mushrooms
Mm-hmm.
before I spoke to you. Yeah, that's sort of a sort of small thing that I can feel grateful for right now.
Yes, yes,
And
yes.
the other thing, although it's a much bigger thing, was, what we were appreciating about being together now.
Yes, yes, yes.
But it's quite good to, I think, as a discipline, to think about what is the very smallest thing that I can
I
feel,
love that. I
think
love
about
that.
that.
Yes,
You can think of something in the moment.
I love that. I love that.
Mm.
Yes, maybe shall we kind of bring our
Yeah,
conversation
to a
today for a
natural.
close? I
Yeah,
mean, you mentioned also, of course, menopause, perimenopause, which are all kind of milestones in a woman's aging process, and they can be so turbulent. So we haven't gone into that today, but we might do another day. But
yeah,
I really, yes. So, yes, thank you so much for being here with me. And in a way, what we're doing, Amelia, that's what I love about our connection. We are opening up a conversation, a very
yeah.
basic, realistic,
Unfinished.
human
Yeah, absolutely.
human to human conversation. It's an ongoing conversation, isn't it, in our own minds with each other. And I think my aim or my wish for this podcast is that some people might watch it and saying, oh, no, that's really helpful. I hadn't thought about this. And then they might explore it in their own lives, in a way. Because, like we
Yeah,
said, this aging is universal. Uh, Menopause is universal. Health and ill health are universal experiences. And we have the opportunity to craft our experiences
yeah.
as we see fit, and that's,
Yeah,
I
and
think,
prepare. We
important.
can prepare. We can do, and I'm quite a good preparer. I
Right.
think, and
Yes.
so I've prepared, I think, quite well for my aging process. And will continue to
Yes.
do wherever I see that I can. You know.
That's brilliant. That's brilliant. I may have to consult you in preparation of my own, aging process, which is of course ongoing. But yes, preparation, thoughtfulness, mindfulness is the important gratitude. They're important
Yeah,
ingredients
yeah, yeah,
to
absolutely.
make the journey kind of more smooth, maybe, because
Yeah,
it can be quite a turbulent journey.
yeah.
Yeah. Right, Amelia, then I say goodbye to you now, for now,
Thank you,
and
Kirsten.
thank you for your time.
Okay, thanks very much.
Goodbye, everyone who is watching, until the next episode of the podcast. Take care. Bye.
Bye.